Hello, welcome to the Happy Families podcast, real parenting solutions every single day. Normally on a Friday, Kylie and I sit down and we have an I'll do better tomorrow chat where we reflect on the week that was and highlight what's worked and what hasn't. But today's something different. The reason being, well, twofold. Number one, I've been away in Melbourne and Adelaide doing talks all over the country, trying to help families to be happier. But secondly, last week when I was listening to a podcast, all right, I'm going to confess, I was listening to Carl Stefanovic's podcast. He had a conversation with a guy called Ed Schuller. And it was about the content that our kids are receiving in sex education classes in public and private schools, in most states and territories, in primary school and high school. And it left me floored, quite honestly. Like, it left me, I just thought, I got to do a podcast about this. I need to let everyone know because I know that not everybody listens to Carl, including me sometimes, but this one grabbed me and I'm really glad I did. So today, the conversation is pretty simple. What are our kids hearing? Why are they hearing it? Where has this come up? We need to talk about it. That's next. Stay with us on the Happy Families podcast. G'day, welcome to the Happy Families podcast, real parenting solutions every single day. Edward Schuller is the Secretary of the Teachers Professional Association of Queensland and the National Secretary of its parent body, the TPAA. It's part of the Red Union Group, which offers teachers an alternative to the traditional union movement, and it's also non-Labor aligned, which I think is useful. It's nice to know that there are some unions that are supporting teachers that aren't saying that you also have to have a particular political persuasion. Ed has also become one of the most outspoken voices nationally on curriculum content, on school choice, and what he sees as the sexualization of children in education. And Ed joins me right now. Ed, walk me through exactly what was taught to which year levels. Like, what have you actually seen? The materials themselves, reports from teachers, from parents. Where did all this come from?
Thanks for having me on, Justin. Really appreciate it and love the work that you do. Wanted to, I guess, start off more broadly with, I've come across over my time in this role a number of these sort of incidents, and I've thought each time, oh, this is sort of a one-off, oh, this is sort of an isolated thing, oh, it's a bit of a faux pas from a particular school engaging this sort of speaker. And I guess what we've uncovered in the past week or two is that, no, this is a systematic issue. There is a broad-scale third-party organisation under the federal banner of the SRHA, Sexual and Reproductive Health Australia, and they've got their services available to every single state school, every single private school in the country, and they are the leading provider of sexual education in our schooling system. And the interesting point is, and I won't labour it too much because I want to stay focused on how this is impacting kids, but this group started off as essentially, and it's still the Planned Parenthood of Australia. So very much they offer abortion services, they offer transgender surgery services as well. So that's their modus operandi, if that makes sense. They've come into the sexual education space and they are the leading provider by far and away.
Ed, before you go on with anything else, I just want to highlight, if you're a parent listening to this particular episode of the podcast with your children, the content that we're about to discuss is probably for mature audiences. As a parent, you can make up your own mind, but I certainly wouldn't be letting my kids listen to it if they're under at least the age of 12, probably 15. So with that caveat, I'll give you a chance to press pause or find another podcast or, I don't know, find a song to listen to. Ed, let's talk specifically about where the content was discovered and what it was. And when I heard you talking to Carl, if I'm perfectly honest, I don't think that you were clear enough about the seriousness of the content. Now that we've given the content warning, as uncomfortable as it is to talk about it, and I'm certainly not trying to be alarmist here, what I usually find is it's too easy to gloss over this. Can you please be really clear about what the content was, who was reporting it, just whatever you can tell about that part of the story?
Yes, certainly. So, I mean, it goes without knowing now that, you've got to give a content warning for audio listeners. It shouldn't be in our schools. But this particular case was from the Queensland branch. So it's called True Education. This is the Queensland branch of the SRHA. And they were basically providing material which you could argue is pornographic to primary school students, all girls school on the Gold Coast, very private. You're paying tens of thousands in tuition every year. You'd be wanting the best, education for your child at school, at Christian school as well. So you'd be wanting particular values instilled. But what was given to these children by True Education was very graphic details around masturbation, around wet dreams, around sexual consent. And this is all for young girls. And this information was provided in visual form. It wasn't a conversation, a one-to-one conversation. And the most important part is the parents don't know necessarily what is going on, because when parents sign consent forms about sexual education to the school, automatically in their head is what they experienced when they were in school in sex ed, which might have been about safe sex, using a condom, or more innocently, just what happens to your body during puberty. This is not what's happening anymore. This is not what is happening in our school. So that is the more graphic stuff that's happening in the primary school system. But in secondary, it's even worse. It's even worse. And I pulled up a graphic on the Carl Stefanovic show, and I'll try to describe it as best as I can now. But it's basically all of these different, debaucherous sexual positions, describing threesomes and the use of strap-on dildos, all of this sort of stuff, and all of it in graphic form, a 2-page spread showing young children all of these different pornographic material. And it's very confronting. And the caption on that page was, "Your imagination is the limit." I mean, this is what we're teaching children about, using their imagination. It's a horrific state that we're in. And I've got to stress as well, it's not a one-off. This is an organization which is one state body out of a federal coalition. And I think we'll be able to touch on this more so, but this stuff is government funded. So while these are non-government organizations, they're external parties, they are overwhelmingly government funded. In the last 5 years alone, they've received over $230 million. That's $250 million in the last 5 years to largely their sexual education programs. And then again, the ancillary services of abortion and transgender surgery.
And it sounds like we're in the wrong business. We could make a lot more money doing other things. When you held up the images on the YouTube of the podcast, so I was listening to it in audio. I actually went to the YouTube to see if I wondered if there was a bit of bluster here. If I'm perfectly honest, I was skeptical when you held up the images. I don't even have words for how astonished I was. The content is probably reasonably useful and reasonably accurate for the right person at the right time for the right reasons. If my children were being exposed to this, I would be incensed. This is just, to me, it's not acceptable content at all. Steel man the other side for me. Why would a school or a provider of this content say that this is age appropriate and evidence-based? How and why would they or could they?
I think what they would say is that society's sexual proclivities these days is very different to what it was 20 years ago, very different to 60 years ago. So we've got to show all of the most, pardon my language, effed up that there is out there to these children so they can know how to do that effed up. And I think that's a very bad way of going about it. I think they wouldn't categorize it in those terms, but it's essentially there are these practices now which are very popular, and we need to make sure that kids know how to do them safely. I just want to pick up as well, graphics were one part, but the actual content in the wording is another. And there's countless documents. Again, this is one of the state bodies, and this is just one of the documents, and it's talking about ethical pornography, and it's encouraging children to perhaps buy pornography online using money instead of watching normal pornography or whatever, because it might be the actors are better treated or something like this. But it's talking about ethical pornography and how pornography is part of anyone's healthy sexual life. And it's like, why are we telling this to year 11 and year 12 kids and then the other stuff to primary school kids? I mean, it's just perverse. And you've got to ask, who are these people behind this doing such a thing to children?
Yeah, it's one of those challenges as well where if we look at the stats around pornography use, I've just been through this as I've written my book about boys. We know that about 34% of 15 to 29-year-old males are consuming explicit content, pornography online on a daily basis, and a further 53% on a weekly basis, which means we've got about 87% of 15 to 29-year-old males consuming it regularly. I would imagine that part of that Steelman argument would be, well, they're already seeing it, so we're just trying to put some safeguards around it. I still don't think that we should be encouraging it. To me, that's really concerning. Ed, after the break, I want to ask you some questions around how parents can find solutions here. Were parents aware? What can parents do about it? All of that sort of stuff. So we'll continue this conversation in just a sec. Stay with us. We're back. It's the Happy Families podcast. Ed Schuller talking about the explicit content that our children around the country are being exposed to in primary school, high school, especially their later high school years, that would concern, I think, most parents who want to help their children to be safe in their understanding of what's going on with intimacy and sexuality. Hey, Ed, you've mentioned this in brief already, but I want to go a little deeper on this. You've mentioned that a lot of parents aren't aware of what's going on. To what degree are parents told about this? How much can parents opt out? And maybe a deeper question again, your chief objection, is it to the content itself or is it to the lack of transparency around it?
It's the content itself. The lack of transparency is why it's been able to pervade for so long, but overwhelmingly, we're not going to equivocate on this. What is being shown is some of the most debaucherous stuff. It's not good for society. It's not good for children to see, and it's certainly not okay for children to be shown this content by third-party organizations under the auspice of sex ed, really to no knowledge of the parents, because they're signing these waivers. Like I said, they've still got to sign them, but they're signing them, not seeing the content itself. My task to every single parent out there is bang on the door of the principal's office. Before you sign any forms, make sure you see exactly what organization is engaged. And if it's one of these organizations, you want to be seeing the content before it's given to your kid. Again, you are not safe from this. Your children are not safe from this in a private school. This is rife in the public system, yes, but the examples that I gave on the Carl Stefanovic podcast, but also a number of others, these are well-off Anglican schools in Victoria. They're Christian schools in Queensland. They're just independent schools in WA. This is happening everywhere. So you've got to be active as a parent. You cannot be passive. You cannot say, well, they can take care of that. It's an uncomfortable conversation. I know that this is the sort of advice that you would give, Justin, is to have some of those uncomfortable conversations with your children. It must be had because the conversations being had in the completely wrong way, and they're being introduced to some horrible stuff at a young age. And again, just to pick up on what you said before the break, talking about how, well, the kids are seeing this, there's 87% of young men, 15 to 29, that are consuming pornography at least weekly. What state are we in as a society where then our conviction is to say, well, I guess we're just completely lost our way. We've all become perverted and this is bad for our mental health, but we better just make sure, we entrench that further. We've got to go back the other way completely and make sure it's very clear that this should be parent-led education, and parents know best. Parents will not be okay with this sort of stuff being taught to their children. And I think that's the bottom line. Reversing the order of authority here from third-party government-funded organizations to parents again, that will be the key to doing this. So parents have got to make noise at your local school, but please know as well that your principal's hands are tied a lot of the time, particularly in the state system. But you can certainly do your part in talking to the principal and making sure that your child is at least not participating in those classes.
Ed, I want to come back to parent involvement again shortly. I think that you've outlined that fairly clearly, but I just want to really get into that for one final question. But before we get there will be some people who will listen to this podcast. They'll go and look up Ed Schuller. They'll have a look at the organisation that you represent. Your association has a clear position on these culture war issues. How would you respond? And I'm sure that I'll get emails about this. So let me ask you the question straight up. How would you respond to people who would say that this is a political campaign? This is about conservative activism rather than child protection concerns. People will say, well, children should know about wet dreams. Children probably should know about how our bodies work. And we certainly know that there's good evidence that teaching children about protective body safety is in their interests. Consent education has strong empirical evidence behind it.
I would say go look at the content that I'm referring to and come back to me. If you think that that's acceptable, I don't want you around my children. And to pick you up on one thing, these are my strong views. Our teachers are not necessarily aligned with any political party. Our organisation is not aligned with any political party. But overwhelmingly, we're shedding a light on something that is certainly struck a nerve with parents across the country. It has with so many of our members as well. And we're taking a clear stance on this because it requires some moral clarity, because at the moment, you haven't got any mainstream news reporting on this. You haven't got any government ministers, MPs talking about this. So someone's going to have to do it. And if we're going to get accused for being political in some way for protecting children, then I guess bring it on. Who cares? Who cares? This is the stuff that's being shown to children.
Yeah, and it feels like it's been swept under the rug. I don't really have a strong political orientation, Ed, but when I discovered what was going on here, I just felt like we needed to talk about it and make sure that parents knew. So you've highlighted that parents need to be engaged and talking with their principal and their school about this. I guess the last thing that I want to know is, how do you do that effectively? If there's a parent who's worried listening right now and they want to engage with the school, how do they do it in such a way that they don't go to war with the principal over this, especially since you said many school leaders' hands are tied on this? So creating a war over this is not necessarily going to be helpful for families or for schools.
You've got to speak to the principal very politely, very inquisitively, because the principal in many cases won't necessarily be across the content that's being taught. They'll be across, okay, we've engaged this organisation, they've been doing this for a while, oh well. The principal's not going through all the content as well. So don't go into them necessarily, chastising them, but go in demanding answers and get them to find those answers if they don't have them. The second prong is going to your state-based education minister and saying, hey, are you okay with this sort of stuff being taught in schools? And I know a lot of the funding comes from state health departments rather than the education, but it's input into schools.
Wow.
But the education minister has a lot of say in this matter. And at the moment, they're completely silent. I dare say they don't even know the extent of it. So we're really starting at ground zero here. This is the start of a bigger exposure of what's happening in the education system across the board. So parents, have patience with your principal in the first instance, yes. Demand the answers. If they come back and say, yeah, that's what we're teaching and we stand by it, well, then start making a bit more noise. But go to the principal at first. I dare say he or she will want to work with you in sorting this out. So too, the education minister, send through your emails, send through copies of the material that your kid is being provided. Make sure, first and foremost, make sure that your child, if they're being given material for sex ed, make sure they're bringing it back home so you know at least what they're being taught. I feel like that's parenting 101. Over to you on that, Justin, but definitely have to be across what is being taught to your children. So look, it's early days. I'm not going to profess to have all the answers right now. At the very least, what we're trying to get here is exposure of the issue. So please just make sure that your child, your individual child, is not being impacted by this stuff.
Yeah, not our normal Friday content, but a really important conversation. It ties in with the Respect for Relationships content that's being taught in Victorian state schools, with gender ideology being taught from the earliest years. And I think that it's one of those things where parents, I know we've got so much to worry about, but just one more thing to add to the list, and a pretty important one at that. Ed Schuller, Secretary of the Teachers Professional Association of Queensland and the National Secretary of its parent body, the TPAA. Really appreciate your time for such an important conversation.
No, thank you, Justin.
Justin Rulon from Bridge Media looks after audio and sound engineering. Mim Hammonds takes care of our admin and other info. If you'd like more information to make your family happier, visit us at happyfamilies.com.au. Take a big breath and go and enjoy the weekend.